Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Killer Academy, where we take the worst killers Dead by Daylight has to offer and I show you how to best utilize them. Today we will be taking a look at Pyramid Head, one of the most famous video game villains and yet one of the most unreliable killers. It should be prefaced ahead of time that this is another ranged character that ranges on the gimmicky side of the ranged killer chart. At the very least, he is better than Trickster, and not even by a little bit. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look at his powers. This shouldn't take too long. Oh. Where do we even begin? They put so many different stats into this killer, so let's just start with the most basic, I guess. Rites of Judgment is divided into two powers, that being Torment Trail and Punishment of the Damned. When active, whenever you move with this power, a trail of barbed wire will spawn behind you. When a survivor walks through the trail, killer instincts were active and the survival is affected with the Torment status effect, and slows them while they're on the wire. While the wire lasts a long time on the ground, it does eventually disappear. It will also disappear almost instantly if too close to a hooked or caged survivor or a generator. Punishment of the Damned is his more used, and more fun to use at that. When Rites of Judgment is active, performing a basic attack will cause a line of wire, rebar, and girders to rise from the ground, dealing damage to anyone it hits. The attack is also capable of hitting survivors through walls, similar to the Artist. Unlike Artist, however, the attack is very slow-moving, and has very limited range. Any good survivors, or even lucky survivors, will know to move slightly to the left or right, especially since you can't change the attack's direction after performing the attack. This would be like if you couldn't flick with Huntress or Nemesis, and unlike with Artist, you can't snipe people from across the map with unlimited range and tracking, despite on paper how similar they are. On top of that, the survivor can see the red outline on the ground when Pyramid Head attack begins to come up. This makes it even easier for the survivor to dodge, which was already pretty easy. On top of this, if the survivor runs over a section that has just risen while the rest of the attack is still rising, it won't deal any damage. As if this all wasn't bad enough, your killer has a slower speed while using Rites of Judgment. All these things work against your killer in the worst way. Now that Punishment of the Damned is out of the way, let's move back to the Torment status. While active, Torment obscures the vision of the survivor, but not to the extent that actually makes a difference. All that happens is little black lines surround the corner of the survivor's screen. Aside from that, tormented survivors leave a short trails of barbed wire behind them, which does help for tracking. The last thing the status effect does is let the Pyramid Head use one of his other abilities, Cage of Atonement and Final Judgment. When you down a survivor afflicted with torment, and they still have hooks left, you can use the cage. This will perform a short mini-mori of sorts that will send the survivor to the cage. Survivors in the cage cannot attempt to escape, and perks that affect hooks don't affect the cage. This is actually really helpful if you're against a path of a pallet playing against flashlight survivors or suspect the person might be using Decisive Strike. The only downside is that you don't know where the cage is, and coming within the proximity of the cage will teleport the survivor away. These small downsides are well worth removing stuns from the game though, and I find it funny to use against cocky people that use the meta build. Now for the last ability of Pyramid Head, Arsenal, Final Judgment. It's a Mori. Yep, that's pretty much it. It follows all the rules of Moris except for one exception, or rather addition. Survivors must be afflicted with torment to use it. This ability is kind of redundant if you use Moris, but it still does work. Now for how to remove the torment status effect. Unlike most effects in the game, torment does not wear off over time. The only way to remove it are either A, be sent to the cage, or B, rescue someone from the cage. This makes targeting people who are on last hook a lot easier, as they won't be able to escape your mini-mori unless you stick someone else in the cage. This is one of the strongest parts of Pyramid Head, and it helps him get a leg up on survivors. Now for the part of the video where we talk about the killer's perks and builds. The killer's perks are Trail of Torment, Forced Penance, and Deathbound. The clear best in the case of most killers is Trail of Torment, as it gives you the undetectable status for until you damage a survivor or perform your killer's action. This perk is especially good on Pyramid Head. If you pair it with Discordance, you'll be able to sneak on survivors through walls and use your Rites of Judgment to hit them through the wall. Forced Penance pairs really well with Lightborn, Iron Grasp, and Mad Grit, because survivors taking protection hits, which includes being hit if you're carrying a survivor, get the broken status effect. I really like this video, and you'll see in my pig video that it has like this build, my bad, and it has, you see in my pig video, it has quite a bit of viability for discouraging body blocking, especially since Mad Grit not only swings faster, but effectively removes wiggling as a function for survivors. The last perk is Deathbound, which isn't all that good. What it does is when you are outside of a certain range and a survivor gets healed a health state by another survivor, they will scream, revealing their location. On top of that, if they move too far away from the survivor who healed them, they'll get the Oblivious status. Due to the abundance of boons, medkits, and self-care, this perk is largely useless. However, it's kind of fun to use with Colorophobia and Nurse's Calling, and even Thanatophobia, as you're a menace to anyone who's healing. Note, I made the script before Dredge was added in. It can pair very well with Septic Touch as well on top of that. This is actually pretty fun, but isn't the most effective build. For your build, I'd recommend running Tinkerer, Discordance, Trail of Torment, and either Surveillance or Dragon's Grip. This allows it decently effective gen-busting playstyle, but keep in mind that your Dragon's Grip doesn't work with your quote-unquote ranged attack. Insidious is actually pretty fun, as you can camp yourself behind a wall and with a hook survivor in front of you, you can smack both them and the person getting off. It's more mean than effective, however, but I can't say that it's not fun. Pyramid Head is a great killer in the amount of leniency he has with the amount of different builds he can run. With such a diverse playstyle, with how many ways that you can play him, whether it be shooting people through walls or going for a more direct method of attacking, you can find a lot of different builds that work for you. And with that being said, I just gave the most simple and straightforward one that I found, being the one that I described. But I have found some other builds that I'll list here. Dark Devotion, Infectious Fright, Discordance, and Trail of Torment work very well together. Since Infectious Fright lets you see whenever a survivor gets downed, you see everyone around them. This means that you can make more use of your ranged attack, hitting people that are crouched on the other side of walls or on the other side of windows, things like that. It lets you make use of your ability in a way that keeps it refreshing, and it's fun. I think that it's a pretty underused perk, so I'd always like to see more people using it. Dark Devotion is one of my personal favorites. You see, this killer pairs stupidly well with any perk that makes it to where survivors can't sense you. So perks like this, Insidious, Tinkerer, Trail of Torment, all work really well. And I have found use of all of them in great extent. Discordance is just one of my favorite perks. I'm not gonna lie. I am very biased towards this perk, and whenever I don't use it, I feel like I'm naked. So I kind of try to put it in a build if I can, no matter where it goes. And Trail of Torment, his star perk, it's very good. So, if you don't know, every single time you hit a generator when it's not on cooldown, yeah, you can't be sensed. It's really good, and I love it. It's one of my favorite perks in the game, and especially for this guy, since, as I said, you can just hit people through walls. It's really nice, and it definitely makes you feel like you're dealing a lot more damage, since the undetectable status is just so strong for killers. Now for how to play him. Don't try to use your ranged attack too much. Using your ranged attack if you don't need to is a good way to slow your down, similar to Deathslinger, and since it's so predictable, more so even than Deathslinger, since it's slower, they hear the noise, and it doesn't even have that much range. Yeah, you're better off going with Deathslinger if you're just going to ADS all the time. So use it to get the jump on survivors, or if you have space between you and the survivor. You see, something that I found is that if you shoot up a group of wires at a survivor that's decently far away, you can often get them to dead hard or just make a mistake, like looping back towards you. Something else that I found extremely helpful, and I cannot understate this. When you down a survivor who you suspect might have decisive strike, and you don't have the cage ready, similar to how I suggested throwing a bottle at your feet for clown, draw a circle around the downed survivor before you pick them up. This way, when they run through the wire after getting off your shoulder, you'll see them. It's very satisfying, and it actually works more often than you'd think. It counters decisive strike pretty well, and Pyramid Head, it doesn't exactly need that with the cage, but if you don't have it ready, it's always very helpful, and I found it actually coming in clutch pretty often. As for the more jump-scary version of him, if you want to run your perks that give you undetectable, go for it, and I say your main thing, line up shots with generators. Again, I highly recommend the use of either Surveillance or Discordance for this. If you don't know, Surveillance, after you hit a generator, you get alerted when somebody else touches it. And for Discordance, it's Discordance. You get to see whenever 2 or more people are on a generator. It's very helpful, and I'd recommend using that in most Pyramid Head builds that rely on the undetectable status. The undetectable status also works with Dragon's Grip, but his ability itself isn't all that good with it, so it's kind of a dice roll. Dragon's Grip works as a diet surveillance in a lot of ways, and well, that can work out for you, don't get me wrong. It's gimmicky on him, but I found use of it in plenty of scenarios. Now, if you want to use the wire to its best extent, put it in narrow pathways that you suspect a survivor is going to have to go. Put it in, and I found especially helpful if you put it in shack windows or under pallets. Things like this will get people to vault through them, and they won't have enough time to react, and they will most definitely get affected by the wire. Now, at a close range, your best hope is going to try to be as unpredictable as possible. With how predictable it is for him, just try to shoot it in a direction you think that they might be going, but as I said, it's extremely easy to see, and you're often not going to get them. But it's worth trying a lot of the time, as the slowing effect isn't the end of the world, but it still is a pain in the butt. So, for this, you're going to want to do a lot of the tips that I gave for other killers like Deathslinger. You're relying a lot on prediction, but your prediction is much slower. You see, you're going to want to aim not ahead of them. When the survivors see that it's coming up out of the ground, they're probably going to double back to dodge, not going in the same direction that they were. This is very, very hard to predict, as often it will end up with you either completely succeeding or completely failing. As I stated, even if they run back across it when it's still coming up, they don't get damaged by it, and that can lead to annoying situations, but when you do hit them, it's extremely satisfying. Plus, another upside, people have respect for a good Pyramid Head. He's one of the harder and more gimmicky killers in the game, so when people see that somebody can actually hit shots with him, instead of sending you messages saying how bad you are at the game, they'll probably send them actually complimenting you. I've had this happen twice. I can't find the second screenshot, but if I remember to put the first one up, here it is. So, we've got that out of the way. Prediction is a little weird on this guy, but yeah, that's going to be your best hope. Survivors have a tendency to double back, so make sure you aim slightly behind them, because when they hear that noise, they're probably going to try to 360, maybe making them do it straight ahead. Or you could go with the tried and true, aiming in front of them so that the wire hits them. It's just hard. This killer's very, very difficult to play, but not necessarily because he is bad, but because he is just so easy to outplay. It's the exact opposite of Nurse, where Nurse's ability on paper isn't like the most game-changing, but in practice it has the least counters. So, with all that said, let's start bringing up what I would change personally about the killer. So, for my first change for the killer, I was thinking something simple. You could make it to where if the killer turns his controller when he is already shooting, the trail will do sort of a effect where it turns with them. Has anybody here ever played Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare? No? Just me? Well, if you have, you know that Rose in that game, when you shoot, the beams actually turn with you as you're turning. It's sort of like a guided missile type thing. And with that, it could help counter these survivors who are just turning slightly to the left or right. And I think that it could be very useful in most situations. Can we also patent scenarios as a word? Situation scenarios? Anyone? No? Just me again? Okay, I guess this is what I get for playing Garden Warfare. So, aside from that, he doesn't need a whole lot of changes. I would say this actually sounds like a minor nerf, but make it to where, in a way, the survivors could get the barbed wire off of them. Now, this isn't going to be a free thing. I'd say have some sort of station similar to that of Plagues set up somewhere on the map. This doesn't have to be the most discreet location, but it should happen. And when here, the survivors can spend, let's say, 30 seconds removing wire. I feel like that's fair for how hard it is to actually get them in the wire, but for how strong an effect it can have on the rest of the game. But for this, the survivor will, let's just say, get exhausted and exposed for 30 seconds. I feel like that's fair, as with this status effect, it discourages them from removing it if they are in an active threat. But with the time, if you have the time to do it, get that 30 seconds and wear off the exhausted and exposed, you're in way better scenarios. This would also help the killer with focusing on something else. A lot of killers have another focus that they need to sustain, be it Trickster and Huntress grabbing things from lockers, Plague always going for her Vile or Corrupt Purge. Not gonna lie, I can never remember which is which. I'm kinda bad. But a lot of killers have these scenarios, and even Nemesis has it with his monitoring the vaccines. But this guy doesn't, and I think that if you were to add a mechanic like that, it could add another layer of depth. And admittedly, he doesn't need more depth. He is a very deep killer. Incoming cake comments. Yes, I know, I set myself up for that one. But I feel like this killer could have a lot more potential than he does. And with that, the next suggestion comes to mind. Pyramid Head's iridescent add-ons aren't great, to say the least. They're some of the most mediocre in the game. You see, they don't really do anything. I'd still put them higher than Deathslinger, but, you know, I've already had my grievances with him. I'm not going to keep kicking his corpse. So, for many reasons, I think that one good addition would be changing one of the iridescent add-ons. The one that makes it to where you're not undetectable when standing on wire. I can't remember what it's called, but maybe make it when a survivor walks over the wire and Killer Instinct is active, they're exposed for a short period of time. Give the killer some encouragement for placing wire more so than just minorly inconveniencing the survivors for a mediocre outcome that may benefit you in a niche scenario. And I think that this could be a lot better. With this, it would discourage survivors from running over the wire haphazardly. Maybe you could do something like discolor the wire when it's on the ground. This would make it to where survivors would know, oh shit, if I step on this, I'm going to die. You see, one problem that I always have with people like twins is that their iridescent ability has no way to predict whether they have it or not until it's too late. And that's the same reason that I have that folly with a certain perk that I complain about all the time. Now, with this, I think that it could be a bit overpowered, but the amount of times that you catch a survivor out on a wire are few and far between, and I think that it would be alright to reward the survivor or reward the killer for calling out a survivor. Now, I just got a few more minor little eensy-weensy suggestions. First of all, make it to where if the survivor double backs across some of the rebar that's on the ground, when the rest is coming up, they take damage. I don't like how this, stepping on a Lego doesn't come into account here? We've all done that at some point. I refuse to believe you haven't. And you know that that will kill you instantly, alright? It's like stepping on a D4. But other than that, make the speed of the spikes coming up faster. It's real slow. And that's a very big problem with this killer, is that he doesn't manage to actually get his shots off in time. It feels very, very underwhelming most of the time when you're lining up a shot just for a survivor to outrun it. This and my final suggestion: if a survivor were to dead hard across this, then make it to where if it's still coming up at the end of the dead hard, it actually injures them. As it stands, if a survivor dead hards at the beginning of the wire coming up, it won't injure them, and I don't know why this is. Even if it ends with it hitting them, you'd think it'd be something like with Bubba, how he keeps going and can still down the survivor, but for some reason the game gives them invincibility even after it ends. I'm not sure how that works, but it is a pretty inconvenient thing, and it's not like Dead Hard is going anywhere. Oh wait, yes it is. That's right, Dead Hard's getting its nerf. It's gonna not get any range, which is gonna be kind of dumb. Kind of a needless nerf. I don't think Dead Hard was all that unbalanced, but hey, it's fine, whatever. Remove this suggestion then, because that means absolutely nothing now, right? And really, I just think that this killer could be a lot better as it stands. But until then, that is all for this time. If you guys like, leave a comment, leave a like, why not subscribe, and go out, spike some people in the feet, tell them I sent you. I hate this. I'll have to wait for a few seconds before I can stop it.